Welcome to Anime Recaps. In this video, we will explain Yasuke. This anime tells the story of an African man named Yasuke who went from being in the service of Jesuit missionaries during the Namban trade to being a warrior and retainer in the service of Lord Oda Nobunaga. What is the story of his adventure? Let's find out in Yasuke. Yasuke is a Japanese-American original net anime series based on the historical figure of the same name, an African warrior who served under Japanese daimyo Oda Nobunaga during the Sengoku period of samurai conflict in 16th century Japan. Yasuke is set in an alternate reality in 16th century feudal Japan that is reimagined with magic and advanced technology. Yasuke begins in 1579 in Japan, where an African servant named Eusebio Ibrahimo Baloy bravely fights a samurai to defend a boy who accidentally offends the samurai. The fight was finally won by Ibrahimo, who was able to bring down the samurai with his bare hands. Impressed by Ibrahimo's fighting abilities, the most respected daimyo in the region, a man named Oda Nobunaga, intends to recruit him to be one of his henchmen. After redeeming Ibrahimo from his former lord, Lord Nobunaga then prepared him to be brought to his residence and gave him a new name, namely Yasuke. A few days later, Yasuke, who now lives at Nobunaga's residence, is practicing swordsmanship diligently to prepare himself to become a samurai. At the same time, a woman named Natsumaru came to see Yasuke with the boy who was saved by Yasuke some time ago. Natsumaru is a lady samurai for Nobunaga and also the boy's older sister. Natsumaru accidentally goes to Yasuke to thank him for saving her younger brother. After serving Lord Nobunaga for a long time, Yasuke was appointed one of Lord Nobunaga's confidants, despite the discrimination for his skin and distrust of his foreign origin. One day, Lord Nobunaga sends one of his henchmen, a man named Mitsuhide, to negotiate with the Iga clan, where Lord Nobunaga intends to establish an alliance with the clan. Mitsuhide will be escorted by Yasuke, Natsumaru, and several fully armed soldiers in carrying out the mission. Mitsuhide, who hates Yasuke so much, raises an objection to Lord Nobunaga because he balks at cooperating with Yasuke. In fact, Mitsuhide blatantly said that he had never acknowledged Yasuke as part of them. However, Lord Nobunaga didn't care about that at all, because by his side, Yasuke's position was much higher than Mitsuhide. According to Lord Nobunaga's orders, the next day, Mitsuhide could not help but carry out a mission with Yasuke and Natsumaru. When they finally arrived at the territory of the Iga clan and tried to negotiate, the results were not at all what was expected because the Iga clan refused to form an alliance with Lord Nobunaga. Not at his wits' end, Mitsuhide then sent Yasuke alone to face a general from the Iga clan and his troops. He intends to get rid of Yasuke that way, but what happened was just the opposite. Yasuke managed to kill the general and massacred the Iga clan troops alone. In the evening, Mitsuhide and the others are seen rejoicing as they celebrate the victory over the Iga clan, but not so with Yasuke, who felt guilty after slaughtering people from the Iga clan, because he just found out that Natsumaru was actually from the Iga clan. Yasuke's fight against the Iga clan troops is only the beginning of the real battle between Lord Nobunaga's troops and the Iga clan, which will take place tomorrow. When everyone was asleep in the middle of the night, Natsumaru sneaked outside and entered the forest. Yasuke, who saw her departure, then felt suspicious and secretly followed her. His suspicions were proven when he saw Natsumaru involved in a serious conversation with one of the higher-ups from the Iga clan. Knowing that Natsumaru was a spy for the Iga clan, Yasuke immediately reported this to Lord Nobunaga, and they both agreed to change the war strategy without telling Natsumaru. Therefore, the Iga clan troops, led by a daimyo named Hattori Hanzo, became overwhelmed by the surprise attack from Lord Nobunaga and his army. In the battle, Natsumaru finally confesses to Yasuke that she is Hattori Hanzo's right-hand man. Hearing this, Yasuke was forced to kill Natsumaru because she sided with their enemy, even though in reality he had considered Natsumaru a friend and a special woman in his life. The scene turns in 1582 when Lord Nobunaga's troops are pressed into battle against the Dark General who serves the demonic war lady, Yami no Daimyo. Yasuke tries to save Lord Nobunaga. However, Lord Nobunaga chose to surrender because he thought they would not be able to defeat the Dark General's army and get rid of the influence of daimyo, who would soon rule over his entire territory. With Lord Nobunaga's death and the defeat of his forces, daimyo assumes complete control of the land. 20 years later, Yasuke tries to put his storied past as a legendary Ronin known as the Black Samurai behind him and retires as a recluse boatman named Yasun in a remote village. In his spare time, Yasuke always makes time to stop by a tavern on the edge of the village, where he meets a boy named Akiro who is always waiting for him there and keeps asking Yasuke to teach him how to fight like a samurai. However, no matter how hard Akiro tried to ask Yasuke to teach him, Yasuke was still reluctant to teach the boy and always ignored him. Kiro aspires to become a great samurai because the boy wants to end the rule of the tyrannical and cruel daimyo. Kiro is good friends with a girl named Saki, who often listens to Akiro's stories about his dreams and daily life, which Saki finds very enjoyable because Akiro can go anywhere. At the same time, she has to lie weak in her bed because of a mysterious illness she is suffering from. Saki's mother, Ikika, intends to take Saki to see a special doctor who is said to be able to treat a mysterious illness suffered by her. Because the journey that Ikika and Saki will take is quite far and dangerous, Kiro then suggests to Saki's mother to ask Yasuke for help so that he can escort them safely. The next day, Ikika ventured to ask Yasuke for help to take her and Saki to the doctor's place. However, Yasuke then refuses her request because leaving the village is very dangerous and proposes to Ikika to take Saki to a local doctor. Ikika insists that Saki has a mysterious disease that ordinary doctors cannot treat. She is determined to take her daughter to the right doctor to save Saki. That night, Yasuke met Ikika at her house and said that he was willing to escort Ikika and Saki. We don't know what made Yasuke change his mind, but Ikika seemed very relieved to hear that because she also knew about the risks she would face if they left the village. Long story short, Yasuke, Ikika and Saki finally left the village by boat and went down the river. However, on the way, they are confronted by a group of assassins led by a man named Abraham, who wants to kidnap Saki. The fight between them was inevitable. Yasuke and Ikika try to confront the assassins to protect Saki. Yasuke, who had been retired for a long time, became very overwhelmed when he faced assassins who had great abilities. Meanwhile, Ikika finally fell down and died right in front of Saki. Seeing her mother who died in front of her, suddenly Saki felt very angry and accidentally released a burst of energy that was so powerful, which caused them all to be thrown far away. After defeating the assassins, Yasuke decides to bring Saki back to the village because he doesn't know the location of the doctor Ikika will visit. However, shortly after Yasuke returned to the village, Abraham managed to find his whereabouts and the fight started again. Yasuke, overwhelmed by the 4 assassins at once, finally had to give up and collapsed helplessly. Abraham then dragged Yasuke in front of the villagers and slandered him by saying that he was the one who had killed Ikika. Despite being accused of killing an innocent woman, Yasuke chooses not to defend himself. Abraham then took Yasuke to their hiding place and tortured him to get information about Saki's whereabouts. On the other hand, the assassins managed to find Saki's whereabouts, but the little girl tried to fight them using her powers and escape into the forest. Saki accidentally meets Akiro and his friends who intend to help her in the forest. Kiro then told about Yasuke, who was accused of killing Saki's mother. Hearing this, Saki was shocked because, in reality, Yasuke had fought desperately to protect herself and her mother. Memories of that night's events flashed back into Saki's mind until she lost control and accidentally released her power, sending Akiro flying. Feeling annoyed with herself and guilty for hurting her best friend, Saki decides to get out of there, avoiding everyone. However, in the middle of the journey, Saki, who was very exhausted, finally collapsed unconscious. Not long after, Saki finally wakes up and finds that she is surrounded by 2 assassins after her, a woman named Nikita and a self-aware weaponized male robot named Haruto. By mustering her strength, Saki can easily defeat Nikita and Haruto. After that, Saki rushed to the assassin's hideout and freed Yasuke, who was about to be executed. Saki, who managed to paralyze the 4 assassins, now has to face their boss, Abraham, who turns out to have terrible mutant powers. Abraham plans to take Saki to Europe and conquer the continent with her power. Saki and Yasuke tried to fight Abraham and finally managed to kill him with solid cooperation. Since the person who hired their services had died, the 4 assassins assumed they were no longer bound by their mission and let Saki and Yasuke leave. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Daimyo sends one of his best warriors, a woman named Kurosaka, to bring Saki before him. Saki and Yasuke finally return to the village and restore the good name of Yasuke, who was accused of being Ikika's killer. Saki, who now trusted Yasuke completely, then told him that the doctor she and her mother wanted to see was a man named Morisuke. Yasuke looks surprised when Saki mentions Morisuke's name because he really knows Morisuke, who was a samurai in Lord Nobunaga's forces and served alongside Yasuke. Yasuke immediately realized that Ikika's purpose in bringing Saki to Morisuke was not to treat her but to ask Morisuke for help to train Saki to use her incredible mystical powers. Yasuke is also willing to take Saki to Morisuke's place. After preparing supplies and others, Yasuke and Saki started their journey to Morisuke's place. Yasuke also brought Natsumaru's katana because it was very valuable to him. On the way, Yasuke and Saki overheard hysterical screams from several villagers who were being persecuted by Daimyo's henchmen because they were reluctant to tell Saki's whereabouts. Yasuke, who couldn't just stay silent, then intervened and killed them all. However, his resistance was immediately noticed by Kurosaka, who immediately challenged him to fight. At first, Yasuke felt pessimistic that he could defeat Kurosaka because she had the dark power of daimyo. Still, Yasuke didn't just give up and put all his strength into defeating Kurosaka with a little help from Saki. Even though the two of them didn't manage to kill Kurosaka, the female warrior finally gave up and chose to run away from there after seeing how powerful Saki was. Yasuke and Saki continued their journey until they finally met a messenger from Morisuke who would take them to Morisuke's hideout. Long story short, Yasuke and Saki finally arrive at Morisuke's hideout, where Morisuke establishes a school to train children who have powers like Saki so that they can control and use their powers. In that place, Morisuke also built a defense and formed an army if at any time they had to fight against daimyo's troops. After Saki showed his strength to Morisuke, he then said that Saki was the person they had been waiting for because she had the power to match daimyo's power, which would determine whether they would be able to overthrow daimyo's power or vice versa. On the other hand, daimyo seemed furious when he found out that Kurosaka had failed in her mission. After absorbing Kurosaka's soul, daimyo then orders the Dark General and his troops to launch a massive attack on Morisuke's hideout. Dark General didn't take long to find Morisuke's hideout and gather his entire army there. Knowing this, Morisuke realized that he and his troops couldn't defeat the Dark General and his much larger army, and of course, it would be more difficult for him to be with the strength of daimyo. Not only that, but Morisuke also has another problem because daimyo is trying to influence Saki through her subconscious so that currently, Saki can't use her powers. Morisuke then asks Yasuke to help lead the army against the Dark General, while he will help Saki fight daimyo influence. Long story short, Yasuke then challenges the Dark General to a one-on-one duel and determines the victory of the battle. Without thinking, Dark General immediately accepted Yasuke's challenge. However, Yasuke was surprised when he found out that the Dark General turned out to be Mitsuhide. Yasuke of course became very angry over the betrayal that had been committed by Mitsuhide, which caused Lord Nobunaga to die. A fierce battle ensued between them. However, Mitsuhide, who had been bestowed power by daimyo, could easily parry Yasuke's attacks. Even so, Yasuke did not give up and put all his strength into fighting Mitsuhide because it was a tactic where they would launch a surprise attack and give Morisuke enough time to save Saki. Morisuke's troops succeeded in crippling the Dark General's defenses with a surprise attack and killed almost half of the Dark General's army. On the other hand, Morisuke managed to free Saki from daimyo's influence, so she immediately awakened and rushed to the battlefield to help Yasuke defeat the Dark General. Not only that, but Saki also asked for help from Nikita, Haruto and their two other colleagues to help Morisuke's troops defeat the Dark General and his troops. It didn't take long for them to defeat the Dark General's troops, and Yasuke then managed to defeat Mitsuhide. However, the battle did not end there. After the Dark General and his troops were defeated, daimyo immediately fielded his entire army, which was far more numerous and had lethal weapons. Seeing this, Nikita and the assassins decide to sacrifice themselves so that Morisuke and his troops can prepare and activate the defensive shield. At the same time, Yasuke and Saki will directly attack daimyo at his hideout in Azuchi Temple. Realizing the presence of Yasuke and Saki, daimyo then uses his power to influence Yasuke, making him hallucinate and think that he is Lord Nobunaga and Saki is his enemy that he must kill. When Saki was cornered and Yasuke was about to kill her under the influence of daimyo, the figure of Natsumaru suddenly appeared in Yasuke's subconscious and tried to awaken him from the illusion created by daimyo. Eventually, Yasuke breaks free from his magic and daimyo faces Yasuke and Saki in a large monster form. Realizing that he would not be able to face daimyo with his strength alone, Yasuke then asked Saki to channel her power to him so that they could fight daimyo. But as it turned out, daimyo's strength was far greater than they had expected. On the other hand, Morisuke and his troops were overwhelmed by daimyo's troops, especially when daimyo turned their troops into giant monsters and destroyed their defensive shields. Hence, their only hope for survival was Yasuke and Saki, who had to defeat daimyo. Meanwhile, despite having combined their powers and working together, Yasuke and Saki are still unable to defeat daimyo. When they finally got pushed and daimyo was about to absorb Saki's power, Yasuke then sacrificed himself to protect Saki. Unexpectedly, the sacrifice made by Yasuke actually awakened Saki's power completely, and she was able to easily subdue daimyo. Along with the defeat of daimyo, the power and influence of daimyo fell throughout Japan. Saki then revives Yasuke and says that now she no longer feels pain. Daimyo, who has now lost all his strength, asks Yasuke to kill him, but Yasuke said that the people who had been oppressed by him would determine his fate. After that, Yasuke and Saki left Azuchi Castle and decided to return to the village. Their presence was then greeted with joy by the villagers, especially Saki, who was considered a hero who had saved the village and also the entire population of Japan from the rule of the tyrannical and cruel daimyo. Because Saki is now living alone, Akira also offers Saki to live with him and his family. Saki welcomed the offer from Akira and his parents, who gladly accepted her as part of their family. Meanwhile, Yasuke decides to leave the village and go wandering. Before leaving, Saki gave Yasuke Akika's necklace as a sign of gratitude because he had protected her and fought with her. On the way, Yasuke took the time to visit Natsumaru's grave, where he accidentally met Natsumaru's younger brother who had grown up, who happened to be visiting there too. The two of them had a brief conversation before finally Yasuke gave Natsumaru's katana to him and said that Natsumaru died with honor and fought to the last drop of blood to protect her clan. Hearing this, the young man became very moved and thanked Yasuke for returning his sister's katana and telling him about her last moments. After that, Yasuke disappeared and his whereabouts were unknown. The moral that we can learn from this film is that true honor and dignity are not obtained from where we come from or from the beliefs we hold. It's from our own actions that always hold fast to the mandate and never become a traitor, and are willing to sacrifice ourselves to save innocent people and protect the things that are most precious to ourselves and others.